It looks like we got the live stream. Sergeant, please start your recording.
Computer to the recording is a go.
According to the cloud, all set.
The stream looks good.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the remote hearing on civil and human rights on the fiscal 2023 preliminary budget. For council members and staff, please turn on their video at this time. Thank you. To minimize disruptions, please place all cell phones, electronics to vibrate. To send testimony, please send testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair Williams, we are ready to begin.
Thank you, Sergeant. Good afternoon and welcome to the fiscal 2023 preliminary budget hearing for the Committee on Civil and Human Rights. My name is Natasha Williams. I am the chair of this awesome committee, and today we will review the fiscal 2023 budgets for the Commission on Human Rights and the Equal Employment Practices Commission to understand how each addresses the protections for New Yorkers through the city human rights law and in city employment practices. It has been a few budget cycles since this committee has had a budget hearing with both CCHR and EEPC. And so I'm excited to have everyone together today. The Commission on Human Rights enforces the human rights law and educates the public to encourage positive community relations. The Commission's fiscal 2023 preliminary budget totals $14.7 million, including $12.3 million for personnel services to support 136 positions and $2.5 million for other than personal services, otherwise known as OTPS. The New York City Equal Employment Practice Commission, EEPC, is an independent, non-mayoral oversight entity tasked with auditing, reviewing, and monitoring the equal employment practices of the City of New York. Its fiscal 2023 preliminary budget totals $1.3 million, including $1.26 million for personnel services and $87,000 for OTPS. I would like to welcome the leadership of both commissions. The city, CCHR, EEPC, and this committee are in a unique position to proactively support New Yorkers as we continue to move forward from the pandemic. As city employees continue to return to in-person work, there is an opportunity to educate New Yorkers and city employees on CCHR and EEPC's roles and how each works to better the city. I look forward to continuing our fruitful conversations with beneficial oversight hearings. However, we do have a lot of work ahead. Today, I am interested in learning about CCHR's source of income unit, its staffing and bias response. For EEPC, I look forward to discussing the commission staffing, new needs it's requested, and the racial and ethnic classification report. This plan included $1,000 in new needs for CCHR, $1,000 in new needs for CCHR, but decreased both entities' budgets by $486,000 for CCHR and $42,000 for EEPC, with vacancy reductions in both. During this hearing, I would like to highlight my concern for budgets not being sufficiently funded and to further discuss how we can increase the budget and how these budgets will address the needs of an agency in order to fulfill the city charter mandates. The committee would also like to discuss this and other budgetary changes in Mayor Adams' administration's first budget to understand his vision for the commissions. As this is my first budget hearing as chair of the committee, I look forward to learning more about the Commission on Human Rights and the Equal Employment Practices Commission. They're very important roles as I plan to stretch the limitations of this committee in subsequent hearings. I also want to thank so very much our committee staff for their hard work. Senior Financial Analyst Jack, Deputy Director Isha, Senior Counsel Jay Sari, Legislative Policy Analyst Liam, my Chief of Staff Ashley, and my Budget and Legislative Director Everton Smith. I'd like to welcome and thank the Commission on Human Rights for the work that they do. I'm looking forward to hearing from the commissioner, who is no stranger to the council. And I'd also like to recognize my colleagues who are joining us today, Councilmember Marte, Councilmember De La Rosa, Councilmember Richardson Jordan. And with that, I will pass it back to our committee counsel for a few procedural items.
Chair Williams, just before we get started, I would need you to gavel in the meeting.
This is important, right? There we go.
Thank you. My name is Jaysri Ganapathy, and I am counsel to New York City Council's Committee on Civil and Human Rights. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are recognized to speak, at which time you will be unmuted by the Zoom host. If you mute yourself after you've been unmuted, you will need to be muted again by the host. So please be aware that there could be a delay in muting and unmuting, and please be patient. Having my own muting issues. Today, we will hear testimony from the Commission on Human Rights and the Equal Employment Practices Commission. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you to speak in order. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes, including responses. For panelists, when called to testify, please state your name and the organization you represent, if any. I will now administer the affirmation to the administration witnesses. From the Commission on Human Rights, Commissioner Annabelle Palma, Deputy Commissioner Sapna Raj, and Deputy Commissioner Kajori Chaudhry. And from the Equal Employment Practices Commission, we have Executive Chair Jean Victor. I believe we will have Vice Chair and Commissioner Elaine Rice. So panelists, if you can please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? Commissioner Palma?
Yeah, yes.
Deputy Commissioner Raj?
Yes.
Deputy Commissioner Chaudhry?
Yes.
Executive Chair Victor?
Yes, and Executive Director.
Oh, my apologies, Executive Director Victor. And is Vice Chair Rice here?
Commissioner Reese should be on probably closer to 2 o'clock.
Got it, thank you. You may begin when ready. I believe we'll be starting with CCHR.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Williams and members of the Civil Human Rights Committee. Thank you for today's hearing. I'm Annabelle Palma, Commissioner and Chair of the New York City Commissions on Human Rights. Today, I'm joined by Sapna Raj, Deputy Commissioner of Law Enforcement Bureau, and Kajori Chaudhry, Deputy Commissioner of the Community Relations Bureau. I have had the honor to lead this agency since October of 2021. I am proud of our team. I am proud of what our team has accomplished over the past 5 months. Work that builds on legislative, policy, enforcement, and educational advancements at the agency since 2015. The Commission is the civil rights enforcement agency in the city of New York that implements the New York City Human Rights Law, one of the broadest, most protective anti-discrimination and anti-harassment laws in the country, with 27 protected categories and which covers housing, employment, and public accommodations. By statute, the Commission has 2 main functions. First, the Commission's Law Enforcement Bureau enforces the city human rights law by investigating complaints of discrimination from the public, initiating its own investigations on behalf of the city, and utilizing testing to help identify violations of the law. Second, through the Community Relations Bureau, which is comprised of community service centers in each of the city's 5 boroughs, the Commission provides workshops and trainings on New York's rights and the obligations of businesses, employers, and housing providers under the city human rights law, working with community partners and sister agencies. Community Relations focuses on preventing discrimination and works closely with community partners to mitigate the impact of discrimination through restorative justice initiatives, among other innovations. In 2015, the Commission established the Office of the Chair, the agency legislative, communications, policy, and adjudicatory hub which complements and support our law enforcement and community relations work. So far in FY22, the human rights law has been amended twice to add employment protections for domestic workers and to promote salary transparency in job postings. That is in addition to the 36 amendments the human rights law that the council passed between 2015 and 2021. Today, the law includes provisions on criminal history discrimination in employment, protections for survivors of gender-based violence in housing and employment, and provisions on source of income discrimination. Our law also prohibits retaliation against individuals who seek to oppose discrimination, file a discrimination complaint, or participate in a related investigation. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission's work has continued, expanded, and pivoted to address new challenges, including racial disparities in access to healthcare and housing, the needs of frontline workers who have disabilities or are pregnant and seek accommodations to continue to do their jobs safely, as well as the rise in anti-Asian bias and anti-Semitism, and violence against transgender and gender non-conforming individuals. I will speak about the breadth of our work today, but I want to take a moment to highlight how our agency worked to create a comprehensive approach to the needs of New Yorkers throughout the COVID pandemic. In FY20, the Commission launched a COVID-19 response team to handle all reports related to the pandemic. Comprised of staff from the Law Enforcement Bureau and the Community Relations Bureau, this team has succeeded efficiently in tracking and supporting New Yorkers facing harassment and discrimination connected to COVID-19. The team worked diligently in advising businesses of their obligations under the law to preempt discrimination. The COVID-19 response team in our law enforcement side took over 300 actions in FY21, including closing 14 rapid response inquiries, issuing over 200 advisory of obligation letters to businesses, conducting 23 successful emergency interventions, and filing 39 complaints. We will continue to work with communities and respond to the discrimination as we enter a new phase of the pandemic and the city opening up. I will focus my comments today on FY21, starting with just a snapshot. In FY21, the Commission resolved 895 cases, assessed a record $9.74 million in damages and penalties for violations of the city human rights law. In addition to resolving cases for monetary relief, the Commission has shaped restorative justice remedies to repair the harm experienced by individuals and communities impacted by discrimination. For example, in instances of employment discrimination, the Commission has negotiated resolutions that require respondents to invest in employment pipeline opportunities for underrepresented groups and to engage with community-based organizations to facilitate broader recruitment. In housing cases, settlements have been set aside of apartments for voucher holders. Overall, the Commission has established a cooperative approach to fostering human rights law compliance. In many instances involving first-time violators of the human rights law, where no complainant was harmed by a violation, the Commission has sought to educate businesses about their legal obligations and work with them in creating non-discriminatory policies and practices, rather than pursuing monetary penalties. We have also developed new trainings and initiatives that respond to the experience of a wide array of New Yorkers. In FY21, we launched a new training on age discrimination, and we are currently finalizing a training on the Jewish experience and anti-Semitism. These complement our bystander intervention trainings, trainings on the Muslim experience, trainings on combating anti-Black racism, and education and outreach through our community liaison and lead advisors who work specifically with LGBTQI individual New Yorkers New Yorkers of the African diaspora, East Asian New Yorkers, transgender individuals, among other New Yorkers historically underserved and underrepresented. The attorneys in the Law Enforcement Bureau evaluate and investigate allegations of discrimination brought to the commission by members of the public and utilize the agency's investigatory and prosecutorial powers to root out pattern or practice or other forms of discrimination through commission-initiated investigations. LEB and its specialized units, the Early Intervention Unit, Source of Income Unit, and Gender-Based Harassment Unit offer the option of resolving claims in lieu of filing a complaint, leading to a quicker resolution. Resolutions through pre-complaint interventions have significantly increased over the past several years, as LEB has worked to provide timely resolution despite an increase in caseloads. In FY21, the Commission fielded 9,055 inquiries from members of the public in the form of phone calls, emails, letters, visits to Commission offices, and queries to mobile intake units dispatched to community sites or at Commission events. This includes 687 inquiries communicated in 12 languages other than English. For comparison, the highest number of total inquiries in recent history was 10,015 in FY20. In contrast, in 2014, the Commission received 4,975 such inquiries, almost half the number of inquiries received in FY21. In the first quarter of FY22, the Law Enforcement Bureau has already received 4,162 inquiries. The overall increase in inquiries in recent years can be attributed in part to the Commission's efforts to raise its visibility and inform communities about the broad protections afforded by the New York City Human Rights Law. Our campaigns that affirm all New Yorkers' right to live free from discrimination and harassment and improve access for New Yorkers regardless of the language they speak. In FY21, the largest number of inquiries were in the area of employment, with housing not far behind. We received 1,373 inquiries related to employment and 924 related to housing. When looking across all areas covered by our law, disability-based inquiries were the most prevalent across all jurisdictions, followed by inquiries related to race. We received 723 inquiries related to disabilities and 529 inquiries related to race. In FY21, the Commission continued its effort to provide immediate relief from harm and facilitate quick resolutions where appropriate through the pre-complaint interventions and the specialized units I have already mentioned. In FY21, the Law Enforcement Bureau resolved 214 cases without filing a complaint. The most common pre-complaint interventions involve disability accommodations and housing, 91 interventions, and a lawful source of income discrimination in which a tenant or prospective tenant was denied an apartment, or the renewal of a lease based on the use of rental assistance, 13 interventions. The Commission's authority to initiate its own investigation without a member of the public filing a complaint is another critical tool we use to enforce the human rights law. In these cases, the Commission identifies potential widespread violations or deeply entrenched discriminatory practices and initiates an investigation. In FY21, the Commission initiated 48 such investigations and filed 17 Commission-initiated complaints. Testing is also a critical tool that the Commission regularly deploys to determine whether there is discrimination in housing, employment, or public accommodation. As part of an investigation, the agency may send testers to perform in-person testing or have testers conduct telephone or online testing of potential employers, employment agencies, landlords, real estate brokers, restaurants, hospitals, gyms, stores, or other public accommodations to see if they are treated differently or are given different information because they belong to a protected class. In FY21, the Commission tested 878 entities in spite of COVID limitations. An entity may be tested for violations in multiple jurisdictions and or multiple protected classes. The Law Enforcement Bureau filed 643 public initiated complaints of discrimination in FY21. 63% of those cases was in employment and 20% were in housing. A reduction we attribute to the pandemic and the eviction moratorium. Disability-related claims were the most common across all areas, jurisdictions at 20%. The other highest areas of claims were race at 15%, gender at 15%, and national origin at 8%. The Law Enforcement Bureau remains a venue for justice where recovery and affirmative relief are calibrated to address the harms caused to New Yorkers To that end, since 2015, the agency has broken records year after year with respect to damages and penalties assessed. And last year was no different. In FY21, the Commission recovered $9.74 million in compensatory damages to complainants and civil penalties, and it was the highest in Commission history for the third year in a row, and 2.2 million more, but it was 2.2 million more than in FY20. Of that, 8.7 million were awarded in compensatory damages to complainants and 1.68 million in civil penalties to the general fund of the City of New York. In addition to monetary relief, the Law Enforcement Bureau continues to innovate creative solutions that deter future harm and put restorative justice principles into practice to change the dynamics that led to harms in the first place. Many transformative resolutions come through settlements. In FY21, 30% of the cases were resolved through settlements. 3 examples illustrate the innovative approach taken by the Bureau and reflect our focus on developing meaningful resolutions that are structured to foster change. The Commission's work to end source of income discrimination against New Yorkers has led to the novel remedies in housing. Specifically, the Law Enforcement Bureau has required housing providers to set aside a number of units specifically for renters using public assistance. One landmark source of income conciliation in FY21 resulted in a housing provider setting aside 36 units of voucher holders across their portfolio of properties. The Commission is the first local civil rights enforcement agency to secure set-asides in source of income conciliations, creating a path to tackle underlying systemic issues of access to affordable housing. Since implementing this strategy in 2020, the Law Enforcement Bureau has secured almost 200 set-asides for voucher holding New Yorkers. The agency has also focused on addressing discrimination and harassment in the workplace, whether related to criminal history, sexual harassment, or gender identity. A Commission-initiated investigation into the pervasive sexual harassment and retaliation at a major news network led to $1 million in civil penalties and changes with respect to the network, including waiving forced arbitration in employment agreements for any claims brought under the New York City human rights law. Most recently, the Law Enforcement Bureau entered into a settlement with a social networking site after an investigation into algorithm discrimination against the LGBTQI community. The commission launched an investigation into the site's adult content ban, through which an image classifying algorithm identified content for removal, resulting in a disproportionate removal of images and negative impact on LGBTQI users. As part of the settlement, the social networking site agreed to take steps to engage an algorithm expert, identify sources of bias, then remove them, as well as to change the process for identifying content for removal. The site will also engage in staff training and report the Commission on the changes and the changes that the company makes. The settlement, after a 3-year investigation, is a groundbreaking agreement to address algorithm bias issues. The Commission is also equipped to address cases through mediation. For 5 years, the Commission's Office of Mediation and Conflict Resolution has provided a voluntary program available at all stages of a case for no cost at all. The office is an independent unit staffed by a mediation director, and in FY21 mediated 47 cases to resolution, the most mediations since 2009, representing in the aggregate damages for complainants totaling $2.18 million. The average time for the acceptance of a case in mediation to its closure was 154 days. The Commission's Community Relations Bureau, better known as CRB, is charged with cultivating understanding, respect among the city's many diverse communities, and raising awareness about the protections under the law. This work continues to prove vital as New York continues to be tested by acts of hate, bias, and discrimination. In FY21, we reached a historic number of over 100,000 New Yorkers served through outreach efforts. The Community Relations Bureau works diligently every day to foster inclusion and understanding. Through the agency's lead advisors and liaisons and the development of targeted training, which I mentioned at the beginning of the testimony, we work to ensure recognition, dignity, and respect for all New Yorkers. In recent years, the Commission has built out its focus on restorative justice approaches as well, seeking input from communities affected by discrimination. For example, in the spring of 2021, the Commission convened a series of focus groups with Black New Yorkers to gain further insight into how, if at all, Commission responses that attempt to address harm at the individual and community level should be deployed after incidents of anti-Black racism. With a continued emphasis on restorative justice framework, the Commission promotes both positive community relations and healing. The Commission's bias response team was resurrected in 2016 to respond to publicly reported incidents of discrimination, harassment, and bias. Where appropriate, the team contact the victim to inform them of their rights and provide guidance on possible responses. During the pandemic, when the city saw an uptick in anti-Asian and anti-Semitic incidents, the Bureau pivoted to a more holistic approach to combating bias and hate, an approach that focused on community solutions, solidarity building, as well as a direct response to incidents. While centering human rights in the city's reopening, the Commission doubled down on its effort to combat anti-Asian discrimination and harassment through enforcement, public education, and community engagement. We held a series of talking circles to hold space for AAPI New Yorkers during these challenging times. The Community Relations Bureau spearheaded bystander intervention trainings to equip AAPI New Yorkers and allies on how to diffuse bias incidents. In FY21, the Community Relations Bureau hosted nearly 50 bystander interventions trainings in English, Mandarin, Korean, and Cantonese, empowering over 3,400 New Yorkers with tools to be upstanders against bias and violence. The Commission also piloted bystander intervention trainings in Spanish and is committed to offering this training in other languages as well. In recognition of the importance of reaching our youngest New Yorkers and fostering positive and inclusive environments among young people in schools and other settings, the Commission has significantly expanded its youth programming in recent years and established a Youth Advisory Council to inform the agency's work. Now, in its third year, the Commission's Youth for Equity and Solidarity initiative, better known as YES, incorporates student-led community and school action plans and expanded programming in issue areas relevant to the lives of young people in New York City today. The lead advisor for youth initiative supports the YES Council members with trainings and other opportunities that build their advocacy and organizing skills using a human rights framework. In FY21, the YES Council held their first symposium titled Youth for Equity and Solidarity Symposium, Our Future, Our Rights. The YES initiative has served over 8,000 youth and continues to reach diverse groups across the city. The Office of the Chair houses the agency, policy, legislative, rulemaking, and adjudicatory functions and implements major commission projects. As the hub of the interagency external partnerships, the office negotiates legislation and promulgates rules, legal enforcement guidance, and other outward-facing materials, providing clarity and interpretation of new provisions of the human rights law, including ruling on appeals of decisions from the Law Enforcement Bureau and final decisions. In FY21, the agency's policy and regulatory priorities continue to reflect our commitment to diverse communities. The Commission converted legal enforcement guidance on race, discrimination on the basis of hair into formal rules, and also released new legal enforcement guidance addressing age discrimination in the workplace. In light of the amendments, the human rights law regarding employment discrimination on the basis of criminal history, the Commission launched a public education campaign with legal service providers and re-entry organizations to promote a new guidebook for workers and updated legal enforcement guidance in this area as well. We are extremely proud that just 4 days ago, on March 12th, expanded workplace protections for domestic workers went into effect. Today, domestic workers have the right to be free from discrimination, harassment, and retaliation in the workplace. The Commission has been working diligently to develop accessible materials on new employee rights and employer obligations, collaborating with local and national domestic worker advocacy groups, and we will be engaging in ongoing outreach and education now that the law is in effect. In the coming months, we will release guidelines on the new salary transparency requirements that were passed by the City Council in December to foster pay equity, which will go into effect in May. The Commission has developed a track record of successful campaigns on social media and other digital platforms and in community press addressing the rights of Jewish New Yorkers, centering the experiences of Black New Yorkers, and addressing COVID stigma, as well as raising visibility of new legal protections. In FY21, the Commission partnered with public artist in residence, Amanda Pingbody Pakia, on the I Still Believe in Our City campaign, which gave a voice to the city's AAPI communities and garnered over 122 million estimated impressions, along with national and international press attention. The Office of Communications and Marketing also led a You Do It With Your Heart campaign in partnership with the Department of Small Business Services, Black Entrepreneurs NYC initiative, raising awareness of the economic impact of COVID-19 on Black entrepreneurs. We are also proud that we prioritize MWBEs and have continuously received an A grade for spending more than 50% of eligible funds in MWBEs. Social media and press outreach elevate the Commission's relations, restorative justice and enforcement actions, and the Commission's amassed nearly 3,000 press mentions throughout FY21. In FY21, the Commission maintained 100% investment in community and ethnic media print advertising. In tandem with over 5 million social media impressions, the Commission's website had over 1.6 million visits in FY21. Our work has broad reach and it reflects the commitment and diligence of our team. As of today, the Commission has a headcount of 136 with 101 active staff. The staff across each unit and borough is committed to working in partnership with communities vulnerable to human rights abuses, and many represent these communities as well. We are a small but diverse staff and speak over 29 languages across our agency. The FY22 adopted budget provided for a total budget of $14,021,193. For FY23, the preliminary budget provides for $14,744,233, which consists of $12,299,226 in personnel services and $2,444,977 in other than personnel services and funding. In conclusion, I am honored and privileged to have this opportunity to speak to you on behalf of an agency committed to ensuring that all of those who live and work in or visit are treated fairly, or visit New York City are treated fairly and with dignity and respect, regardless of race, color, age, religion, creed, national origin, disability, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, or any other protected class. We will continue to collaborate with a wide range of stakeholders and to promote transparency and integrity in advancing the human rights of New Yorkers with continued support of the Adams administration and the New York City Council. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify today, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to questions from Chair Williams. Panelists, please stay unmuted if possible during this question and answer period. Chair Williams, you may begin your questions. I believe the chair is muted. She is still muted.
Can you hear me now? Awesome. Thank you so much for such a comprehensive testimony. Just wanted to acknowledge that I did see Council Member Joseph pop in. I know she had my name because I sent her my link, but that was Council Member Joseph. Just wanted to acknowledge that she had popped into the hearing. And I know you're thrown into the fire after just 6 months on the job. And still trying to figure things out. I wanted to skip down to some of the staffing changes, or actually new needs. So we want to understand CCHR's new needs. This plan included a new need for $1,000 for the city's vaccine incentive. Did CCHR request any new needs that were not funded?
Chairwoman, I don't have the information on new needs for vaccine mandate. I can get that information to you once I get it from my budget team.
Okay, and do you have any other new needs outside of the vaccine incentive? Like as a commission, are there any new needs that you have as it pertains to budgetary requests?
We don't have any new needs requests into OMB, but I will circle back with my budget team and get you the information that you're requesting through a follow-up.
Okay, no problem. So as I was saying before, we also want to understand staffing changes and staffing needs. One of the things I heard you say is there's 136 positions, but 101 active staff. What is the difference between the active staff and non-active staff?
Active staff meaning right now individuals who report to work on a daily basis. We have 101. Our overall head count is 136.
So the differences are some folks on leave and currently not coming into the office, but still technically on payroll.
I have 4 individuals who are currently on leave, and then we have vacant positions. So 101 active staff members, and then 4 of those individuals on leave.
Okay, is there a plan to hire folks the positions that are vacant?
So for vacancies, we continue to work with OMB for the needs of our agency, and there's always request and interest to want to fill these vacancies, and we will continue to work with OMB as we need to.
Okay, awesome. So the commission's most important resource is its staff, of course, including confidential investigators, support staff, and others who perform CCHR's core functions. Over the past few years, the headcount has undergone significant changes. The actual headcount for CCHR increased 130% from 59 positions in fiscal 2013 to 140 positions in fiscal 2018, and has decreased 25% to 105 as of January 2022, although now it's actually 101. The past 2 years have included reductions to budgeting headcount in many plans, 18 in the fiscal 2021 adopted budget, 8 in the fiscal 2022 preliminary plan, and 18 in the fiscal 2023 preliminary plan. Do you believe the reduction of the budgeted headcount has had a negative impact on CCHR's core function of enforcing the human rights law and educating the public?
Thank you for your question. Madam Chair. I don't. We have a dedicated and passionate staff that I'm proud to work with on a daily basis, and they have not wavered in making sure that we meet the mandate that the law calls for. They continue to work on a daily basis, and their task has been felt by the vacancies that we have, but we have, they've always have continued to advance the human rights, the human rights law, and have been, great in coming up with innovative ways throughout the pandemic, right? Whether they were working remotely or coming into the office, they have been focused on making sure that we meet that mandate.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure, as you know, and as I've mentioned before in other conversations, the current budget plan calls for additional vacancy reductions. How does CCHR prioritize and choose the vacancies that will be eliminated? Does OMB give the ability to CCHR, or is this something that you're sort of told to kind of do by OMB?
We have not been told by OMB that there's going to be that we have to give any additional vacancy reductions. We are in constant communication with OMB, but there are no further vacancy reductions.
Okay.
And in our conversations with OMB, we are submitting new needs to fill those vacancies that we need.
Okay. There's some questions around attrition. Of course, the commission's title with the most positions are agency attorneys and human rights specialists. With information provided to the committee, the attrition rate for the commission has been between 19 and 10% from fiscal 2016 to fiscal 2021. And we were wondering if CCHR provides any incentives or thought of ways to improve upon the attrition rate and retention of staff.
Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
So it's pretty much, yeah, no problem. I'm pretty much, what is CCHR doing to, one, maintain folks who are currently working for CCHR? And then what is CCHR also doing to recruit employees to the agency?
I think what we felt like all New Yorkers, right? The commission was impacted by the pandemic, and some of the vacancies that we have seen can definitely be attributed to the change that recently happened in administration. We see that when one administration goes out and a new one comes in, a lot of there's some staff turnover. There's individuals who took the opportunity to retire or move to other spaces that were offered throughout the city or the private sector. We're always interested in making sure that New Yorkers want to come and work for CCHR and do the work of advancing the human rights law. So, the team is always out there trying to encourage individuals to apply whenever we are allowed, to have job postings. And we love an EEO recruitment team in helping us to advertise the vacancies that we have. And we have been focused on staff wellness and support, and ensuring that the staff that remains knows that they are valued, that they're important, that work is important. And I think that is also demonstrated in the outcomes that the staff has seen in the work that they have done.
Thank you. Actually, you just mentioned COVID-19, and I know in your testimony, you mentioned that the commission's response to COVID-19, using staff from the Law Enforcement Bureau and the Community Relations Bureau to advise businesses of their obligations under the law, to preempt discrimination and enforce the human rights law, of course. So with the different phases and changes and iterations around COVID-19, what will this COVID-19 response team do? What would their work look like as we sort of lift certain mandates?
So I know that internally we continue to think of innovative ways to address the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in, and as the city reopens, I will ask Deputy Commissioner Kadri Chaudhry to expand on the work that is being done and what that will look like.
Can she be unmuted?
I think she's muted.
Yeah, can we unmute Deputy Commissioner?
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself. Thank you for the question, Chair Williams. So the COVID-19 response team on our CRB end was put together from staff who were also involved in other forms of outreach. So they focused on, during the pandemic, what we saw was an uptake in anti-Asian, anti-Semitic bias and hate. So the team pivoted in doing more trainings like the bystander intervention trainings. The team pivoted in doing more outreach focused on certain communities to ensure that New Yorkers were aware of their protections under the law. And as we move into the new phase in the pandemic, the team will continue to build on those tools that they had used during the pandemic to ensure that, particularly with our bystander intervention trainings, that these trainings are used in communities to disrupt bias and hate in the city.
Thank you. I just want to quickly, acknowledge that Councilmember Salamanca has joined us.
Thank you. And we know that discrimination continues, so our staff has, other items in their portfolios that they're working on as well. And I will also ask Deputy Commissioner Savna Raj to elaborate a little bit on the work that her team has done around the COVID response.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the Law Enforcement Bureau continues to work on COVID responses to discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. That work just continues. It hasn't stopped just because the city is starting to reopen. It, of course, changes a little bit as to whether people are allowed to take leave because of COVID and what kind of leave they're allowed to take, for example, employment. But we continue to work on investigating and litigating and informing businesses on what the obligations are.
Thank you. Now I kind of want to move us to a hot button topic that keeps coming up in a lot of different spaces, which is source of income. And so the commission has staff in the source of income unit to address discrimination against New Yorkers who seek housing with assistance of a federal, state, or city voucher, subsidy, or other forms of public assistance. The Human Resources Administration, HRA, previously performed some of this work. And in the November plan, $2 million and 19 positions were added to the CCHR budget, expanding the budgeted headcount from 5 to 24. Now CCHR will perform all source of income functions for the city. The fiscal 2023 preliminary plan reduced CCHR's budget by 18 positions and $430,000. It is our understanding that all 18 positions were reduced from the source of income unit, leaving it with 6 budgeted positions. Can you please provide the fiscal 2023 budget for the source of income unit and the actual headcount as of this month?
So our source of income, the commission had launched a source of income unit in January 2018, and it was staffed by five attorneys. That unit has now has only one attorney currently as an active employee at the agency. Nonetheless, the LEB team, the attorneys at the LEB team across LEB work on source of unit issues and cases. This attorney is not the only attorney. The fact that the SOI unit currently only has one attorney doesn't mean that the other attorneys at the LEB unit don't deal with cases that come to us through source of income. The SOI unit works in real time with complainants who have been denied housing because of their voucher status. So the commission staff will, continues to digitally, work and make sure that individuals are not being shut out of housing because they hold a voucher.
All right. As the source of income unit has undergone significant changes just in the last 6 months, can you kind of explain like the timeline of everything? I know you sort of high level went over it, but is there like a specific timeline? Do you plan or have you requested additional support for the source of income unit?
So thank you for your question, Madam Chair. I had mentioned before, we continue to work with OMB. We continue to be in active, conversations with OMB in terms of source of income and what the needs of the agency will be. And I'm confident that we will be able to, to get the agency's needs met, right? And just this morning, I had a conversation with Commissioner Jenkins at HRA. So we're also doing collaborative work to address the issues of source of income.
Okay, I have so many other questions on this, but
before you move to your question, I'm sorry, Pablo, do you want to add on the source of income through the lens of LEB?
No, all I will say is that we continue to do the work of addressing source of income voucher holder issues, and all the attorneys in LEB actually handle this. And what we had was a unit of 6 people, and out of that, 3 of them were attorneys and 3 of them were non-attorneys who were working to get people into housing immediately as an intervention. And our attorneys actually in LEB are actually doing that work at this point.
Okay. As I was alluding to, I have a whole bunch of questions, but I think we probably will arrive to some of the same answers, which is you all are working with OMB and I guess HRA to determine the best possible way to ensure that we are meeting the demand. Obviously, no matter the size of the source of income unit, people in the city are experiencing housing discrimination based on method of payment. I personally have been surprised at the data and some recent sort of revelations that are happening that I know will probably, come to the public within the next couple of months. And so we know it's a problem. And when I think about like the #1 issue in the city that every single person talks about, if you ask any New Yorker, what is the #1 issue? I'm sure they might say public safety, but the next thing is definitely probably like affordable housing and the homeless crisis. And so if the city has such an amazing expansive program, but it's underutilized because people are being discriminated against, and we as a city aren't doing all that we can do to put the necessary resources in place to address this issue, then it becomes a cycle of systematic injustice, and us as a city not really doing all we can do to address the matter. I wanted to just pause to see if my colleagues have any questions before I ask another round of questions. Nope. All right, cool. So I'll continue.
Chair, it looks like yep. Commissioner Palma would like to say something.
Oh, sure. She's muted. You unmute her?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Before you move on, I just wanted, just for clarity, Madam Chair, the $1,000 for the COVID, for the COVID work that you had raised, It was not a new need. It was a reimbursement for COVID items. And we're currently submitting new, and as I stated before, we're currently submitting new needs for the agency to OMB.
You're going to submit new needs. You have not.
We're currently,
Okay.
we have and we continue to submit new needs.
Okay. Can you share what those new needs are?
I can get back to you through our follow-up discussions.
Okay, no worries. All right. Switching gears a bit to discuss bias-based incidents. So in late 2016, following the rise of bias incidents and discriminatory harassment, CCHR relaunched the bias response team. The team works to support and stabilize communities after incidents of bias have occurred through canvassing, educating community members, distributing information about the human rights law, and partnering with schools and youth programs. CCHR also protects those who have experienced discriminatory harassment. How does CCHR differentiate between discriminatory harassment and a bias-based incident?
I will share that we have incoming of the discrimination and biases that happen. I will ask Sapna Raj, who leads our LEB team, and the attorneys are able to determine the difference between the two.
So under the New York City human rights law, if you want to file a complaint, a discriminatory harassment claim, there has to be some threat of violence or an incident of violence, a physical act of violence. A bias incident a general bias incident does not necessarily have that. So that would be the primary way in which you would make a difference. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, can you just say it one more time though?
Yeah, so in discriminatory harassment, the law requires that there be some kind of threat or that there be violence itself. When you think of a bias incident in general, it doesn't always have that component in it.
It could just be a slur.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So CCHR tells New Yorkers to report discriminatory harassment to police, especially if it is violent, which is what you mentioned. And we know that the NYPD is tracking hate crimes, and in 2020 had 266 total compared to 524 in 2021, a near doubling in one calendar year. Has the commission seen a similar increase in I guess what you might call bias-based incidents or discriminatory harassments over the past few years? If yes, what is being done to combat the increase? If no, does CCHR believe there is a decrease, or is the increase not being captured properly?
We have seen an increase, and especially given what we've lived the last 2 years because of the pandemic, and our team through CRB, our LEB team continues to do intake and assess cases as they come in to make sure that we're helping New Yorkers and keeping them safe from any of these incidents, but also through our CRB team, the team continues to work on conferences, workshops, training sessions. In FY21, the CRB team completed 1,680 conferences and workshops, all in virtual spaces. We've done community outreach, we've done the trainings, we've partnered with CBOs, FBOs, with elected officials and other community leaders and partners to ensure that we are raising awareness around the human rights law and educating the public on how they can be helpful to their neighbors and continue to raise awareness.
Okay, the bias response teams respond to bias-based incidents, and information about the incidents is included in the mayor's management report. In the first 4 months of fiscal 2022, there were 46 responses to bias-based incidents compared to 125 during the same time period in fiscal 2021. Why has there been a decrease in responses by the bias response team in fiscal 2022?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yeah, no problem. Essentially, we just wanted to know why there's been a decrease in responses by the bias response team in fiscal 2022 versus fiscal 2021.
I think we have in FY22, we revamped our approach to bias response from responding to incidents in a more holistic approach that focuses on prevention, solidarity, and more community building. And so we adopted tools to engage communities, like doing what I mentioned, like the training that I mentioned before, like doing the bystander training in multiple languages, creating talking circles for communities, ensuring that, we are having more conversations within the community, doing more preventive work before something, before an incident occurs. Kadri, do you want to add to what I just, to my response in case
and just to throw like another question in the mix as you guys are answering this one, is the metric only highlights responses to the incident. So we're also wondering, are there incidents that the team doesn't respond to?
If an incident, if we know of any incident, we usually, our response is to immediately contact our partners in the community. Our partners in the communities contact us. So there's always communication on what's going on. If we don't initiate a response, and a response have been initiated by a community-based organization, we have participation in it, because the communication is always flowing back and forth through community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, are community leaders, where these incidents may be happening or are more prevalent. Where they are more prevalent, we've been doing a lot of more proactive work, more preventive work, to ensure that we don't see an increase in those incidents. And I'll let Kadri add to my response.
Thank you, Commissioner. Exactly that. I mean, I think for us, it has been pivoting to looking at the holistic picture, that response is just one aspect of it, and there are other agencies that are also part of the response. But then how do we ensure that we train New Yorkers in creating safe public spaces for each other when we see an incident of bias or discrimination or harassment? So there was a slight shift in terms of making sure that we are using all our tools of outreach, all tools of bystander interventions, and other tools in bias response. So we've moved away a little bit from just bias response to working with communities, ensuring that things are done proactively, either through those trainings or through holding talking restorative justice processes, like the talking circles in communities.
Okay. So we have a whole bunch of questions on complaints and process and results, but I know we have a hearing coming up at the end of the month solely on complaints. And I want to respect everyone's time.
And Madam Chair, whatever questions you have that we have not been able to answer, we can definitely do a follow up, a written responses to your questions.
No worries at all. And like I said, we will go into greater depth at the end of the month on responses and the complaints. But since we've been talking a lot about outreach and education, did have some questions on that. So the commission offers workshops, training sessions, and all of the things that you just mentioned. And so we know that schools have been remote for parts of the past 2 years, and youth-based training sessions have increased compared to pre-pandemic figures. There's some good things that came out of the pandemic, with 266 in fiscal 2019 and 300 in fiscal 2020, and 293 in fiscal 2021. How has CCHR been able to increase youth outreach, although physically interacting with students has been difficult?
So at the height of the pandemic, we know that the youth sessions that we were conducting had dropped. Obviously, schools were not allowing in-person trainings, and students were experiencing what we all know now as Zoom fatigue. And so it was a little bit difficult to engage them, but we continue again with our youth liaison and youth advisor here on staff. We continue to talk through innovative ways to re-engage our youth and bring them back. We are focused and determined to bring back those numbers pre-pandemic, to the pre-pandemic levels. And Kadri, if you want to speak a little bit more about what the team is doing, please do so.
Sure. The other thing for us also is we're not only working with the school, we're in partnership with entities like other sibling agencies like DOE, DYCD, and also connecting with other agencies that have youth councils. Like we have an active youth council that the commissioner mentioned, called the Yes Council. So with youth who are part of the Yes Council, reaching out to their partners, as well as our partnerships with our sibling agencies, we should be able to expand our work in this space.
So for education and outreach as a whole, CCHR has had a goal of serving 80,000 people annually, which has been exceeded each fiscal year since fiscal year 2018. What is CCHR's education and outreach budget, and how many dedicated staff do you have?
Kadri, do you want to respond?
Should I do that? Okay. So for our CRB's OTPS budget, it is for fiscal year 22, it's 57,495, and in CRB we have 32 staff members.
Would you all like to do more for education and outreach? I'm sorry, the question is yes. I want you to do more.
We're always striving to do more, and I will tell you that the staff is passionate and dedicated, and again, always looking for partnerships and continues to collaborate with not only city agencies, but again, community-based organizations and other leaders in the communities to do more.
So part of this figure includes training sessions. I think I attended a training session. I don't know if you have other training sessions, but what does this really entail? And who receives this training? And is it a requirement for city employees?
It's not a requirement for a city employee, but our goal is to fulfill our mandate with the mandate that the law calls for. So we're always offering our trainings and our and the resources we have, not only to the city council, but also to community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and to the public as a whole. And so besides proactively promoting our trainings and our resources, we also get a lot of incoming, right, from the public and from the other spaces that I mentioned for us to do training and to share our resources. And I will also share that through through Deputy Commissioner Raj's legal team, many of the conciliations that have been settled also call for the, either landlords, employers, or anyone who violated the human rights law to also receive training and the resources that we have.
Got you. So I just have a final question before I just turn it back to my colleagues to see if anyone else has any questions. Just about the savings. We know all agencies are going through a peg. So the fiscal 2023 preliminary plan decreases the 2022 budget by $42,500 for a transfer of funding to DCAS. The commission is moving part of its office space to make availability for the Board of Standards and Appeals, which will take over the $42,500 financial responsibility for those sections of the building. CCHR is making additional space according to our knowledge elsewhere in the building. Can you please describe why this shift is happening?
The shift in space?
Yeah.
So we were using space in the first floor of the building that we're in, and we were informed that space didn't belong to us, and we were asked to move. So we had to do some reconfiguring of our offices on the second floor to accommodate for intake rooms. For when we open, where we start receiving the public, when we start receiving the public before the pandemic, we're able to have space to do interviews and our attorneys to meet with the public.
What impact, if any, will the reduction in office space have on employees? And are you making any plans for additional office space?
It hasn't had any impact we were innovative to create space for the staff, but it hasn't had an impact on employee space.
Okay, sounds good. Turning it back to my colleagues, do you all have any questions for the Commission on Human Rights? All right, that means I asked all the questions that needed to be asked. I want to thank you so much for your testimony and questions today. We look forward to following up with you to get some more answers to the outstanding questions, and really just working with you to make sure we are doing all that we can to enforce the city's Title VIII law and make our city a more equitable and just space. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for allowing me to testify, and thank you to the members of the City Council.
Thank you, Chair. It looks like there are no other questions, but at this time, we would like to invite the EEPC witnesses to testify. I believe we need to administer the oath to Commissioner Reese. Commissioner, do you affirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? I believe she needs to be unmuted.
Hello. Hello. I've unmuted. Are you still there?
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties here. We just need you to confirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief.
Absolutely. But the testifier is the executive director.
Yes.
I'm merely accompanying her.
Yes, no problem. We already administered the oath to the executive director earlier. Executive Director Victor, you can go ahead with your testimony.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Williams and members of the Committee on Civil and Human Rights. Thank you for inviting us to provide testimony today. My name is Jean Victor, and I am the Executive Director of the Equal Employment Practices Commission. I'm here today with the Vice Chair of our board, Elaine S. Reese. We are before you today to present testimony on the EEPC's preliminary budget plan for FY 2023 and how it impacts our progress in fulfilling our mandate under the New York City Charter. I look forward to responding to any questions you may have. As you know, the city's workforce has grown to its highest levels ever, but the EEPC has not grown. In fact, we are stretched pretty thin. As an office, we focus on two main areas. The first is our audit function, where we are mandated to evaluate and monitor the employment practices and programs of the city agencies and other city entities to ensure that they have a fair and effective program of equal employment opportunity for women and minority employees, as well as for applicants of employment pursuant to the city charter. The second area we focus on is through our research unit, which has been mandated with conducting a citywide analysis of racial and ethnic classification utilization pursuant to Local Law 13 of 2019. This initiative requires, among other things, that the EEPC identify the racial and ethnic groups underutilized and provide recommendations for correcting such underutilization, recommendations for strengthening agency affirmative employment plan oversight and enforcement, including funding recommendations, and recommendations for citywide corrective actions, including legislative, regulatory, and budgetary, to address A, chronic or systemic underutilization, B, reach citywide affirmative employment objectives, and C, increase diversity in the recruitment, selection, retention, and promotion of city employees. Moreover, the research unit works closely with the audit unit to conduct studies into specific questions, identify trends in the data, seek out best practices, recommend relevant trainings, and note any changes in law. Lastly, the research unit is charged with arranging a biennial symposium on a topic of interest relevant to the work of the EEPC. This year's symposium will focus on underutilization of women and minorities in city government and is designed to give the city's EEO professionals and agency heads ideas on how to recognize and rectify any underutilization found in their workforce. The EEPC's Board of Commissioners is comprised of 5 per diem appointees, 2 by the mayor, 2 by the council, and a chairperson jointly appointed by both. The board is currently awaiting the appointment of 2 appointees by the council, which appointments have been vacant for some time, but which were sometimes needed in order to have a quorum. At first blush, it may be tempting to think that although the EEPC has made previous requests for additional staff and funding, the EEPC can continue to do more with less, particularly during this upcoming fiscal year when the city is trying to close a hole in the budget. And while we continue to audit city entities, we find ourselves struggling to fulfill our mandates under Local Law 13. As of today, the EEPC has an approved headcount of only 14. We just lost one, with recent vacancies in 2 key positions, the Director of Research Initiatives and Public Hearings and the Director of Human Resources. We are lucky in that we have an outstanding team of dedicated and hardworking professionals. But because our approved headcount is so low, the loss of any one position requires that the duties be picked up by someone else, which means that we all must wear many hats. But after a while, this burden of doing the jobs of others gets in the way of being able to complete our own assigned duties, and I think we're at that point. Since 2019, we have requested the ability to hire a labor economist to assist in the highly technical analyses that we are being asked to perform, that we would like to perform. To date, we have not received approval to hire for this position. We had one person who served as our Director of Human Resources and was responsible for all work related to human resources, including the preparation and dissemination of policy, time and attendance, career counseling, medical and leaves of absence, hiring, disciplinary actions, separations, workers' compensation, the EEPC budget, procurement, staff training. I'm not recruiting for another director. Rather, I'm recruiting for a manager who will likely have experience in either human resources or budget, but probably not both. We have one computer associate who also serves as the Chief Information Security Officer, the Administrator of Computer Systems and Support, and the Chief Information Officer. We rely on him greatly to handle everything that involves technology, including but not limited to our computer system, our databases and servers, our phone system, our printers and copiers. He purchases, downloads, and updates all of our software, including proprietary software called Deed and Teammates. He ensures our computer systems are functioning and up to date and serves as the interface between the EEPC and DO-IT. He understands the nature of our work. But if he were to leave, we would have no one in that office that can do what he does. And that goes for pretty much everybody. There is no redundancy in the EEPC whatsoever. I came on board in April of last year. My first question was, what value does the EEPC bring to city government? The value we bring may not be readily apparent. By that I mean that a producer of widgets can sell those widgets and see their value right away by how much the producer realizes in terms of profit. But EEO is a little different. There are legal mandates that must be met, to be sure. And if those mandates are met and more, the city entity will likely have a robust EEO program that results in a more efficient workplace because of a better employee experience, which may also result in greater retention of good employees. But there are also monetary ways of looking at the benefits of a robust EEO program. If done correctly, there will likely be fewer EEO complaints, lawsuits, settlements, and judgments. It is important that the city's more than 300,000 employees conduct themselves in a manner that is uniform, consistent, and non-discriminatory. That's what we ensure, and that's the value that we bring through our audit mandate. Last year, the audit unit completed its sexual harassment prevention and response practices audit of more than 140 city entities over a 4-year period. On the research side, we review the data, we analyze the workforce, make recommendations based on the data. We answer questions such as, are minorities and women promoting up through the system, or are they staying at the same levels? Are our hiring practices non-discriminatory? Is there underutilization or overutilization at the job group level? What should we be doing differently? What sorts of remedies should be put in place? But right now, we only have 2 people to handle the research initiatives. And even when we filled the director position in 2019, the director was promised a staff. She was given 1 analyst who had to split her time between the research unit and the audit unit. And the data scientist position wasn't filled until December of 2021. That was just 3 months ago. Last year, the research unit published its initial report in which those job groups with underutilization of women minorities were identified by agency or entity for both the city and the CUNY community colleges. In this second year, the research unit is looking at underutilization of women and minorities in 7 specific job titles that represent a large percentage of our workforce. All of the job titles under review are competitive and require testing pursuant to civil service. The analysis includes the review of applicants from the point that they apply for a position with the city until the time that they are in the city's civil service list. This report is currently being prepared, pending the receipt of data from the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, or DCAS. Our budget consists of salaries, supplies and materials, contractual services, property and equipment, and other services and charges. Our training budget totals $2,000. One EEO training course can cost almost as much as our entire training budget. The only way we can purchase anything that is not in the budget is to utilize the savings and salary from employees who separate from employment or who go out on an extended leave. In addition to developing our employees, these funds are also used for the replacement of aging equipment. The paradox is that we can send some of our employees to training by using the savings because we're down personnel. I want to conclude my testimony by stating that the EEPC provides the city with a great service now, which I believe saves the city a great deal of money later. The EEPC is the investment the city makes now to ensure that it saves substantially more money in the future. But the EEPC cannot absorb any more cuts to its staff and budget. In fact, we would have the tools to do so much more if we had a more consistent and stable source of funding, such as a percentage of the city's budget, if we right-size the staffing levels by adding the labor economist and at least 2 lower-level positions to provide some relief and support and bring our headcount to a total of 17. Such investment will ensure the EEPC is able to meet its mandates and provide exceptional value to the City of New York. For these reasons, I asked for your support and commitment to this commission that it has to make do, that has had to make do with so little for so long. And with your help, I believe we can and will be of greater value to the City of New York. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to questions from Chair Williams. Panelists, if you can please stay unmuted during this question and answer period. Chair Williams, you can begin your questions.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the testimony. So this plan, we're looking to kind of understand your new need request. So this plan did not include any new needs for EEPC. Did EEPC request new needs that were not funded?
Yes, we've requested a labor economist for the last 2 years. And I believe that request is still viable. It's still out there.
Okay, and did OMB provide any feedback on why the need request was not funded?
Not to my knowledge. I haven't been here long enough to go through the cycle, so this is my first time going through the cycle. As far as I know, it was not addressed, but I wasn't here, so I can't say for sure.
Okay. You're also seeking to understand staffing, impact of reductions and future plans. The Commission's fiscal 2023 preliminary budget is $1.3 million. Of that amount, approximately $1.26 million supports personnel services for a total of 14 positions, which now you said you're down to 13.
We're down to, we have 14 head count, but we have 2 vacancies at the moment. So one person that's been out on long-term leave.
So technically you have 11, because I learned this new term from the commissioner. You have 11 active positions. Okay.
That is correct.
We have 11 active positions, 1 person on leave, and the rest, and 2 vacancies.
And 2 vacancies.
Awesome. Thank you. So with that, this plan includes the reduction of yet another position with $42,000 in savings. Has EEPC identified which position this will be, and how will the reduction impact EEPC operations?
Well, it's been my understanding that as vacancies accrue, then the positions are taken away. So right now we have two key positions that are vacant, and we absolutely positively need to get them filled. So if we do lose a position, we would not be able to function very efficiently.
Do you feel, which you just kind of alluded to it, so I can probably answer this question, but do you feel that the budget is sufficiently funded to meet all of your charter requirements?
No.
Okay, and how much funding would the commission need for both personnel services and other than personal services, OTPS expenditures? How much more do you think you would need?
Yeah, I focused my remarks on personal services as opposed to OTPS. I believe that the main thrust of what we need would be personnel as opposed to additional other than personal services.
What is your ideal headcount for the EEPC?
17.
Yeah, at a minimum, I would say we should be at 17 at a minimum.
Okay. In previous testimony in front of this committee, the EEPC has stated it would like to be structured using a model similar to that of the Independent Budget Office to the Office of Management and Budget, where the IBO budget is 10% of the OMB budget. Has EEPC's previous proposal been to have similar design as IBO with OMB, but with EEPC and the comptroller?
I'm sorry, can you say the last part of your question again?
So essentially, the question is asking, similar to the equivalent of IBO and OMB, would that be with EEPC and the comptroller?
I believe so. I believe so.
Okay, so essentially, as IBO and OMB is structured, IBO takes 10% of OMB's budget, so the commission in turn would prefer to take part of the comptroller's budget.
Correct. I believe that was the request that was made back then.
And so is that request still active? Do you still hold this feeling?
Yes, we do.
Awesome. Okay, what advantages, if any, do you think this design would have? And why do you think this hasn't been done already?
Well, I think the advantage is that as we would have a more stable source of funding. And I think that as the city does well, as the comptroller's office does well, their budget increases, then ours would be impacted positively as well. Why this has not happened, I don't know.
Thank you for your answers. To understand how EEPC performs its audits, we understand, and this is the nature of the next questions, we understand that the charter requires EEPC to audit, evaluate, and monitor the equal employment programs, practices, and procedures of every city agency and other municipal entities at least once every 4 years. With the recent vacancy reductions, hiring freezes, and hiring restrictions, how has the EEPC's audit processes and monitoring of agency compliance been impacted by the current state of hiring?
Yeah, more directly, we have one of our managers has been out for nearly a year on a long-term leave. We have recently been able to backfill a couple of positions. So we have 2 new investigators for a total of 4. And with 1 manager, we anticipate that we will be able to meet our mandate with that team.
We've done it electronically. How do I unmute?
You're heard. We can hear you. Now we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
One of the ways in response, because I really have been with the commission far longer than the executive director, the manner in which we have attempted to deal with the shortfall, which continues to be consistent, i.e. the fact that we are tiny and have this huge mandate, is to use the offices of Do It and to try to automate as much of our inquiry as possible, and to use automation for the review of our analyses. And we have found that the city agencies and entities, by and large, are up to the task of providing us with the material online. So it has allowed us during COVID to essentially been able to function and continue to function and continue to meet our mandate, even though people were not in their offices. We were able to get the data electronically, to analyze it electronically, and to respond electronically. That being said, we are as efficient as we possibly can be, and we have new needs that have been mandated by the city council. We were operating at full capacity before Local Law 13 was passed. Local Law 13 places on us additional mandates and asks us to do something we really are not ready, able to do. We are not labor economists. We really don't know what workforce issues are out there in terms of labor, who are job titles, the number of people, the staffing. We have real issues in terms of being able to analyze our workforce and to be able to come up with the mandated suggestions that the city council has placed on us. It is a real problem. And I have to tell you, I testified to such effect as local law 13 itself was being passed to your predecessor chair. And the answer to the question is we are still without a labor economist. There seems to be some recognition that what we are saying is accurate, that what we are telling you about our needs is accurate, and yet there seems to be no response. And I cannot for the life of me understand why. When you place a responsibility upon an entity and require, and it isn't even request, require that we provide you with the following information, and yet we tell you we don't have the capability to do so, getting no response to me is mystifying.
Absolutely.
End of my testimony.
No, I appreciate you putting that on record, and I know we've had the same conversation, and it does suck when, you know, us legislators, even though I wasn't here at the time, pass things that are unfunded. So I definitely hear what you're saying and appreciate you mentioning that on this hearing. I wanted to go back a little bit on the trainings. You mentioned that, Director Victor, that the EEPC's training budget is only $2,000. And so wanted to know what training you provide, if this training is just for EEPC employees, or do other folks receive the training, and what challenges arise from such a small training budget?
Right. So this budget is for EEPC employee training. And the training that we typically use is offered through Cornell. And it's the EEO training program that they offer. The staff we train them, we stagger the training so that we can try to reach everyone. So one year we may do 2 people or 1 or 2 people, and then the following year we'll do a different couple of people. It's $2,000 total, but it's $1,000 of DCAS training and another $1,000 of just outside training. So we can use the $1,000 for courses that DCAS offers, and the other $1,000 would be for external training. I'm sorry, did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
I believe so. I believe so. If not, we'll always just follow back up. We just wanted to kind of understand. So for instance, CCHR administers training to whoever, really. So we wanted to understand who this training is for, and it is a low amount. So we wanted to understand how the budgeted amount might impact your ability to do your work.
Yeah, the way that the only way that we can increase the amount of training that we do for our team is if there are savings realized through the termination or separation of employees. You know, as it takes time to fill those vacancies, there's that salary savings that we're realizing, and we can use that money to do training. That's how we've been doing pretty much everything, from dealing with outdated or aged equipment to training our personnel. We use those salary savings to make that happen.
Thank you. Going into sort of enforcement and non-compliance sort of questions, following an audit that finds an entity is not in compliance, the entity as the agency has 6 months to change the practices. If after 6 months of compliance monitoring, the EEPC determines that the appropriate action has not happened, the EEPC will notify the entity in writing, and the entity will receive a determination of noncompliance and is subject to another audit in less than 4 years. As the 2021 annual report has not yet been released, we have not seen the figures for 2021. How many entities are non-compliant?
I believe there was only one entity that was non-compliant for 2021.
Okay. Are they making strides to reach compliance?
They are going to be re-audited this year.
Okay. More broadly, does the EEPC feel that its enforcement powers given in the charter are effective?
No.
I knew the commissioner was going to say that. If not, what would you change? Excuse me.
We need some ability to limit the entity that either defies our jurisdiction, and there has historically been some, or questions our jurisdiction. The easiest thing is to say they can't hire for a period of time unless they comply with what we ask them to do. They have no ability. If you assume that the non-compliance is because they are not dealing fairly with their employees, which is our finding, then they ought not to have the ability to hire any more employees for a given term. I think that would be a sufficient stick. Right now, all we can say is naughty, naughty, and we say naughty, naughty to the mayor and not even say naughty, naughty to the public, and therefore disobedience has no cost.
Gotcha. Are you able to share which entity is not in compliance and any other highlights from the annual report before it's released?
Chair Williams, I will share the following with you, which I don't know whether the executive director will be pleased or not. The city council has now twice during the period of time that I've been on the commission argued that we don't have jurisdiction over you guys. I say the charter is really quite clear. City council says you're a mayoral appointed agency. Answer is we're not. We've had an issue with an ex-commissioner of consumer affairs who argued we didn't have jurisdiction. Somehow the district attorneys are willing to accept our jurisdiction, but the city-owned agencies or entities are having problems with it. Having someone coming in and looking at your employment practices and asking questions about how you deal with people who may argue about being discriminated against in some manner on your employee base, and how you handle those inquiries. We don't ask for names. We don't look at people. We don't look at the actual caseload, but we want to know what the practices are within the entity. There are people that don't like people who are nosy. We have been mandated to be nosy. We have been mandated to also tell the world that the entity is complying. If you have some concern that there may be non-compliance in a certain area, then you don't want us to come in looking at anything. And so my experience is that, by the way, in case you're interested, the mayor is not any happier when we come in to audit them either. So the two political entities that should know better somehow have problems with our coming in and nosing around.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
It's helpful. So are you saying that the council is the entity that's non-compliant?
I'm not.
No. Okay.
They are in compliance now, but it took them a very long time. And I will point out, we were doing a sexual harassment audit.
So Director Victor, is there another agency that is not compliant based off of the 2020 2021
We
annual
don't know.
report.
I don't have the numbers in front of me.
I
The
have it.
executive director would probably know who it is.
So,
I don't.
so there was one entity that was determined to be in partial compliance. It was the Office of the Kings County District Attorney. They were issued 15 corrective actions and they implemented 9.
Again, this was a specific audit that we did for 4 years of sexual harassment.
Okay, thank you. So Commissioner, I know how much you love Local Law 13, and as you alluded to, as a result of Local Law 13, EEPC's first racial and ethnic classification report was released in July of 2021. The report will be issued annually for 10 years and provide insightful information on city entities. The 2021 report uses data from the 4th quarter of fiscal 2020, which includes data during the COVID-19 pandemic. The report analyzes underutilization, previous determinations, recommendations, and more. As this was the first of 10 reports, what difficulties and lessons has EEPC drawn from the first report?
Well, the first one, and I'm going to be terribly candid at this point, is we've discovered that DCAS's data is dated. It's old. So we are dealing, and you will discover, and we will make it very clear at the outset that we are dealing with dated data. I do not know the answer as to how dated it is. The executive director can tell you directly. But to the extent that we don't have current data, it makes me question the validity of any analysis we might do.
And I would like to add too that I think that it would be most helpful if we had direct access to the data. Having to go through different agencies takes it's a lengthy process, and we don't deal in looking at specific individuals. We look at data sets. We're not looking to get any personal information on anybody, but what we're looking for are trends. We're looking for we're looking at data sets that are relatively large, and it's just very, very difficult to get the data in any kind of timely fashion. So if we could have access to the data ourselves, I think it would be most helpful in order to perform the analyses, because anytime we want to make a change or we need something additional, it goes through a process where we have to justify why we want the data, and then we have to wait for the data to be provided, and as I said, it just takes a long time.
Understood. Do you have anything?
Known as the bureaucracy within the city is not helping us.
Understood. Gender underutilization was not included in Local Law 313. Thus, women. What'd you say?
We added it. We decided to look at women as well. We thought it was an oversight or an undersight.
Okay. Were there any outcomes, and will this be included in the 2022 report?
Yes, in our initial report, we did not include women because we followed the letter of the law. We went back and we submitted a request to council to amend the law to include women. And then we reran our numbers in anticipation of this to include women. In the second report, women are included in the analysis, despite the fact that the law still has not been changed.
Okay, well, there's definitely a lot of work to be done and budgets and appropriations to be allocated to make sure that you're maximizing your work. And I want to be supportive in pushing the administration and the council to make sure that you guys are fully funded to have the proper staffing to do your work most efficiently. I will stop here and turn it over to any of my colleagues that may have any questions for EEPC.
Councilmember, we don't see any hands raised for questions at this time.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank the commissioner and executive director, Victor, for being here today. And I look forward to working with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for listening to my ranting and raving. I apologize for it.
I love your rants.
Meet you soon in person, I hope.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.
Thank you. We will now turn to public testimony. I would like to remind everyone that unlike our typical council hearings, we will be calling on individuals one by one to testify. Each panelist will be given 3 minutes to speak. Please begin once the sergeants have started the timer, and council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom. I will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you and the sergeant at arms will give you the go-ahead to begin upon setting the timer. Please wait for the sergeant to announce you may begin before delivering your testimony. I would like to now welcome Cassandra Warney, Jean Ryan, followed by Jean Ryan, and then Nick Peters to testify. Cassandra Warney, are you here on our Zoom?
I do not see her, Council.
Thank you. Seeing that Cassandra is not here, I would like to invite Jean Ryan to testify. Jean, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Jean Ryan, President of Disabled in Action of Metropolitan New York, DIA for short. We and other people with disabilities are concerned about the demise or essential demise of the Commission's, Human Rights Commission's Neighborhood Services Program, which had a few talented and capable people who solved many access problems for us and with us. This program allowed people with disabilities to get access to so many places and services without going through a long process with attorneys, making appointments, and so forth. It worked. It was not expensive. I do not believe that Project Equal Access is enough. What did they help with? This is regarding the neighborhood services group. Access to restaurants, access to grocery stores who illegally had fences blocking wheelchair entry, hospital and ERs, and museums with counters that were over our heads. Doctors' offices where we couldn't get in, even if they had a ramp. Movie theaters where we could not see. ATMs with no contrast. They were great problem solvers. That great program couldn't solve every access problem, but it solved many by negotiation. Ignorance and prejudice about disabilities and towards people with disabilities has not gone away. There is still a need for a program like the Neighborhood Services Program that does not focus mostly on housing access. Housing access is super important, but there are so many other things that we need to go to and get into, and we cannot do it. And a lot of it is just because of indifference and prejudice and ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions from council members, I would like to now invite Nick Peters to testify, followed by Amy Lynn and Jonathan Gaffney. Nick, you can go ahead when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the committee for letting me provide this testimony today. My name is Nick Peters, and I'm the Policy Associate for Housing Rights Initiative. Our organization was founded in 2016 with the goal of taking a proactive and systematic approach to targeting, investigating, and fighting fraudulent real estate practices, promoting fair housing, and connecting tenants to legal support. Over a year ago, HRI began diverting a portion of its resources to combating source of income discrimination. In March of last year, we filed a lawsuit against 88 real estate companies that were discriminating against Section 8 voucher holders. Our organization recently completed its second investigation into voucher discrimination, and we will be making a major announcement on it soon. This investigation will go down as one of the largest fair housing investigations in the history of fair housing enforcement. Our upcoming announcement will expose the disastrous results of New York City's failure to properly fund its fair housing enforcement agencies. Currently, the New York City Commission on Human Rights is plagued by low staffing numbers and a lack of resources in their source of income unit. This is undoubtedly contributing to the astronomical number of violations that our organization has been uncovering in our investigations throughout New York City. This, of course, should come as no surprise. A City Limits article by the reporter David Brand on housing discrimination referred to New York City's fair housing enforcement system as hollowed out. Additionally, unlike NYC, Neighbors Together, the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, and the Housing Data Coalition put out a joint report called An Illusion of Choice: How Source of Income Discrimination and Voucher Policies Perpetuate Housing Inequality, and highlighted enforcement as underfunded and inaccessible. One of the recommendations made in that report was for a minimum of $1 million in funding for the CCHR source of income units. We unequivocally support this recommendation. Aside from being a moral issue, a failure to properly fund our fair housing enforcement agencies is a fiscal issue. When families are unable to use their housing vouchers due to unlawful discrimination, the cost of homeless shelters goes up, the cost of healthcare goes up, the cost of law enforcement goes up, the cost of everything goes up. Fair housing enforcement is not just an expenditure, it is an investment. I thank the committee for their time today.
I have a question for Nick. I know you were on and you heard the commission's testimony, and they seem to believe that their current enforcement unit can sort of absorb the source of income units deficiencies in staffing. From an outsider's perspective, do you think that this is accurate, or are you seeing a gap in their ability to really enforce this issue?
I'm actually would not be at liberty to answer that question right now. But if you want, we could set up a meeting between our staff and your staff and talking about it further.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, I would now welcome Amy Lynn to testify, followed by Jonathan Gaffney and Cassandra Warney. Amy Lynn, you can go ahead when the sergeants call time.
Time starts.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Lynn, and I am the Health Policy Fellow at CACF, the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families. Thank you very much to Chair Williams for holding this hearing and providing the opportunity to testify. Founded in 1986, CACF is the nation's only Pan-Asian children and families advocacy organization and leads the fight for improved and equitable policies, systems, funding, and services to support those in need. Nearly 19 million people reside in the New York City metropolitan area, and over 800 different languages are spoken. Because of New York's linguistic diversity, it is incredibly important to ensure language access in all settings. Language barriers are a huge obstacle faced by many folks in immigrant communities, and especially in the AAPI community. In New York City, AAPIs have the highest rate of linguistic isolation of any group, as 46% have limited English proficiency, or LEP, meaning that they speak English less than very well. Moreover, more than 2 in 3 Asian seniors in New York City are LEP, and approximately 49% of all immigrants are LEP. In the summer of 2021, we conducted a rapid needs assessment in collaboration with the NYU Center for the Study of Asian American Health and the Chinese American Planning Council. We surveyed over 1,000 adults of Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, or Arab descent living in the metropolitan New York area to assess the current and ongoing needs of the community during the COVID-19 pandemic. This study highlights the disproportionate impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on New York Asian American community and demonstrates the importance of language access. Specifically, this study found that 1 in 3 Asian American adults reported language barriers being a challenge during the pandemic. Furthermore, 27% of AAPI respondents indicated that they felt like they did not have regular access to timely, accurate information during the COVID-19 pandemic in their language. Being unable to access vital COVID-19 information or health services can be a threat to one's livelihood, so ensuring language access for all New Yorkers must be prioritized. Language access is also paramount for our LEP families with children attending New York City public schools. During the pandemic, the Department of Education struggled to communicate with LEP families, often deprioritizing translation of key policy announcements such as obtaining devices and Wi-Fi. Policies were announced in English first and translations were published later on, rather than concurrently, meaning that LEP families had less time to understand and adapt to changes. Ultimately, these issues served to further alienate LEP families from city schools and exacerbated many challenges. Because the Committee on Civil and Human Rights oversees the New York City Commission on Human Rights, which is responsible for the city's language access plan, our major recommendations for the Asian American community are as follows: expanding language access and services for COVID-19 efforts and social services via additional funding, enforcing language access plans across the city, including the timely publication of materials in the top 10 non-English languages, and ensuring accountability for language access complaints. Overall, we see a need for more intentional collaboration between the city and community-based organizations to better identify language access gaps in our communities and to find solutions that will have a direct impact on our communities. Thank you very much for your time.
Amy, if you could send us like which languages, because I know you didn't go through like which languages you're referencing that you feel there's a gap, that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, I think it's mainly that the language access plans for many city agencies that have been published indicate that they will publish these materials in the top 10 non-English languages that are most commonly spoken in New York City, but we're seeing that these publications have not actually occurred and it has not been fulfilled. So the enforcement of that is really important to us.
Oh, got you. So you're saying that the city is supposed to have these language access plans in the 10 top languages, but have not complied, which is really not fair.
Yeah.
People that
Yeah, the plans have been published themselves, but the plans say that they will translate, and then those translations don't exist.
Translating.
Mm-hmm.
Got you. Do you know if the Commission on Human Rights, so what you're saying is you don't feel like the commission is actually enforcing the translation of materials from different city agencies?
Yeah, we're just seeing gaps because all of the published language access plans indicate that, you know, in hospitals and healthcare systems and other places, education as well, there is supposed to be translated materials, but we have plenty of clients that we've discussed with who say these translated materials don't exist or we don't have a way to access them. So we're just seeing gaps in terms of what we're being told is occurring and what is actually occurring.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering, committee council, we can talk offline, but I'm wondering if the CCHR is actually supposed to be enforcing and working with city agencies to comply with the language access plans. Does anybody know?
Chair, we can definitely explore the issues further following the hearing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Amy.
I would like to, actually seeing no other questions, I would like to now welcome Jonathan Gaffney to testify, followed by Cassandra Warney, and then Stephanie McGraw. Jonathan, you can go ahead when the sergeant call time.
Time starts.
Sergeant, can you call time again?
Time starts.
All right, cool. Hi, my name is Jonathan Gaffney. I'm the Housing Campaign Manager with Neighbors Together. Thank you so much for the time to testify. In order for rental assistance vouchers to be an effective tool that helps New Yorkers out of homelessness, the city must invest in a more robust enforcement against source of income discrimination. The source of income unit at the City Commission on Human Rights, CCHR, is the only city agency tasked with enforcing the source of income law for individual voucher holders, yet their work is undermined by a critical lack of resources. Currently, due to attrition, hiring freezes, and pegs, the unit is currently staffed by one attorney. However, robust staffing for this unit is more critical than ever. The broadening of the New York State human rights law in 2019 increased the number of inquiries that CCHR can receive. And In 2021, both city FEPs and state FEPs payment standards were increased to fair market rent, increasing the amount of voucher holders able to search for housing. Additionally, New York City received an influx of 8,000 emergency housing vouchers from the federal government. Every year since the source of income unit was opened, the number of SOI cases, excluding the years affected by COVID, has increased, and a larger unit will increase oversight in the housing market, give people the ability to use their voucher for housing instead of languishing in shelters during a deadly pandemic. And for fiscal year 2023, CCHR should be funded at a baseline of $1 million to meet this critical need. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Jonathan. Similar to the question that I had asked Nick, do you have any thoughts on or reflections from the testimony earlier from the commission? They seem to sort of note that they are addressing the staffing issue by absorbing the source of income complaints through their current law enforcement unit. Are you seeing something different on the grounds and any gaps?
I mean, I can't really speak to, whether or not CCHR is, the city unit of CCHR is using lawyers from other departments to sort of plug the gap. What I can say is that, on behalf of our members, there are so many members that I talk to that have languished in shelters for years and not been able to use their voucher adequately. And so, do you remember when she stated that they were using additional lawyers from different departments when they started doing that? Is that something that they've recently done, or?
That I don't know. I don't know if Jack caught what she said. I don't remember if that's something that it's probably something that they are always doing, because it appears that when the source of income unit was given to CCHR, they never really had adequate staffing. So I think it's something that as an agency, one would assume they've had to reshape.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. Yeah, I would just say, on behalf of my members, on behalf of voucher holders, I don't think that the additional resources have made a world of difference, because we still have delayed responses going on like months, and high turnover rates, and the rest of it. The need to address source of income discrimination is still not being addressed adequately, even though the unit itself does such an amazing job, and our members are really happy to work with them, because when our members do work with them and they're able to meet our members' demands, they're able to get into houses much quicker.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jonathan. Seeing no other questions at this time, I would like to invite Cassandra Warney to testify. Cassandra, you can go ahead when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts.
Thank you, Chair Williams and other members of the committee. My name is Cassandra Warney. I'm a senior program manager with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, CSH. Our mission is to advance solutions that use housing as a platform to deliver services and improve the lives of the most vulnerable. We have a plan on how to expand supportive housing for all people who need it on Rikers Island. This is about reducing homelessness and helping people with behavioral health needs, all part of a larger plan to de-incarcerate Rikers, recognizing human rights conditions of Rikers and the need for community supports to support people once they leave is the reason why I'm speaking to your committee. Our analysis shows several thousand people on Rikers Island in a given year, approximately 2,500, are experiencing homelessness and struggle with ongoing behavioral health needs. When released, these members struggle to find adequate support. They cycle through systems, crisis systems, whether that be shelter, jail, emergency rooms. And this group of about 2,500 people costs the city $1.4 billion in incarceration costs each year. And this group of people need an intervention of supportive housing, which is a combination of affordable housing with voluntary individualized services. Study after study shows it works as an intervention for this group of people, and it would take $108 million annually to be able to provide ongoing housing and services. So $1.4 billion versus $108 million. There's more information in the report that I submitted in my written testimony that you can access, but I just wanted to elevate two really important budgetary elements that need to be changed this year. The first is to expand justice-involved supportive housing, JISH, and increase the annual commitment to supportive housing. For JISH, overseen by DOHMH, it's the only dedicated supportive housing for people leaving Rikers. There's only 120 apartments across the entire city. The city has been trying to expand that by 380 since 2019, but the rates are so low, there have not been any bids by providers to that RFP. So we worked closely with JISH providers and other providers who might be interested. And based on the recommendations we have in our report, if adopted, those providers will be interested in applying. And then the second is we're asking the city to double its commitment to supportive housing by 1,000 units and to dedicate 500 of the new units to individuals who do not meet the homeless chronicity requirement due to their incarceration history. Most people who need supportive housing held at Rikers Island are not eligible for the main source of supportive housing in the city because of the homeless chronicity definition, and our recommendation solves this. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope to work with you on this.
I have a question, and I'm never afraid to say that I don't understand something. So in reference to the city's Title VIII law, like are you saying that there's some type of discriminatory practice happening within the housing market because there is a lack of justice involved housing? I'm trying to figure out, like, for the purposes of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, like, how can we support this? I myself, and I know the committee staff is probably sick of me saying this already, like, I think we should look at every single thing that's happening in our city from an equity lens, from a human rights lens. So I can see a lane for that, but just wondering if you yourself specifically had any suggestions or thoughts on that.
I'll say that from a discrimination standpoint, the answer is no. My main reason of bringing this to your committee's attention is just recognizing the conditions at Rikers and wanting to put the report on your radar. When it comes to New York City 1515, and the reason why most folks aren't eligible, they're actually adopting a HUD rule, which is really frustrating, which they don't have to. So main reason is just to put this report and recommendations on your radar.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I believe we can move on. If we have inadvertently missed anyone who is registered to testify today and has yet to be called, please use the Zoom raise hand function and you will be called in the order that your hand has been raised. Seeing no hands raised, I will now turn it over to Chair Williams to offer any closing remarks.
Well, I want to thank the administration and all of the folks who testified today from my very first hearing. I'm really excited to continue to do this work, to, again, stretch the limitations of the committee, and work with partners like the folks who have testified today and the administration to make sure that we really are not only having the necessary laws on the books, which we have very expansive human rights laws in New York City, but that we have the tools to actually enforce what we do have on our books. So I appreciate everyone that has come before the committee today and my colleagues for joining, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Chair, if you could just gavel out the hearing.
That I will get it together for my next hearing.